Hi there, I'm Aleksandr Trofimenkov, the brand chef for KICA Academy, and today we're going to make the individual chocolate cakes. This product is very simple, yet super tasty and popular with adults and children. To make it, I'm going to bake 2 tall sponges and add a thin layer of chantilly cream between them. I'm then going to cover the cake with chocolate ganache and decorate it with fine artistic ganache lines. Sponge, cream and ganache, 3 textures that will come together to make a stunningly delicious cake. Let's get started. Let's start the preparation of the chocolate sponge, which will be used in the individual chocolate cake. This sponge is super easy to make. It consists of very basic ingredients which can be found in any kitchen, in any place in the world. So here we go. To make the sponge, I will need the egg whites, room temperature, then the egg yolks, room temperature as well. Basically, I have the eggs, I separate them into egg yolks and egg whites, and I use both of those components in the preparation. Like this, I'll have more aeration in the sponge, it will be lighter and more delicate. Then I'll have 2 portions of sugar, 1 to whip with the egg whites into a meringue and 1 to whip with the egg yolks. Then a little bit of oil to add moistness to the recipe, to the sponge, and to make sure it will not harden in the fridge too much. Like this, the sponge will be easy to consume, it will melt in your mouth faster when it contains oil and not fat like butter. Then cocoa powder, sifted, quality cocoa powder is here. I'm using alkalized cocoa powder or Dutched. It is rather dark, it will give its characteristic flavor and color to the sponge, it will look really beautiful. And finally, the flour. I'm using all-purpose flour, but you can use the pastry flour in this recipe as well, with great result. So first of all, I need to whip the egg yolks with a smaller portion of sugar and a stand mixer. When you have only one stand mixer, always start by whipping the egg yolks with sugar first, and then proceed to the meringue. Meringue cannot wait, it should be used straight away, while the egg yolk mixture, when whipped, it can stay on the side. It will not collapse too much. You cannot over whip it, so you can whip it first and let it rest for a while you are preparing the meringue. So this is why I'll start with these 2 components. I'll transfer them into the mixer bowl and we'll start whisking them on maximum speed. So I add the sugar. And the egg yolks. After about 5 minutes of whipping, the egg yolk and sugar mixture is ready now. It should look like this. It should be airy, fluffy. It should change its color to pale yellow. It should be rather thick. This is perfect. Now I'll set it aside and we'll proceed to the next step, to the preparation of the meringue. To make the meringue, I'll need to combine the room temperature egg whites with the sugar and then whip them into a light and stable foam. Normally, when you make the meringue for any preparation, you first whip the egg whites a little bit until they get frothy, and then you start adding the sugar gradually, and then whip all together into meringue. In this case, I will not be doing so since I have a very large portion of egg whites and very little sugar. Hence, I'm able to add all the sugar at once and whip all the ingredients together into a meringue. So here are my egg whites. I add them to the mixer bowl. And then I add the sugar. Now I'll start whisking everything together on medium speed, and we'll whip it into a nice and stable meringue, which should be shiny, beautiful, and elastic. It should be flexible, it should not be over whipped. I will show you how it looks like. The whipping time is approximately 4 to 5 minutes on medium speed. After about 5 minutes of whipping, the meringue is ready. Now I'd like to show you its texture. So here it is. It should be like this, soft, creamy, not too stable. I mean, there should be no stiff peaks. It should be like this, soft. It should form a bird's beak. It will mean that it is full of air, and this air will go into the sponge batter, which will then expand in the oven and make the sponge rise. Now I can proceed to the next step. Now I'll combine the meringue and the whipped egg yolk mixture. To do this, I will first fold about 1/3 of the meringue into the egg yolk mixture using a spatula, and then we'll transfer this mixture back to the rest of the meringue, and then we'll fold it gently. So I simply mix a little bit like this. And now I transfer everything onto a meringue. And now, starting from the center, I will fold the egg yolk mixture into the meringue. I'll be doing this carefully, rotating the mixing bowl at the same time, like this. After mixing with the meringue, the texture of the egg yolk, sugar, and the meringue should look like this. It should be super airy. It should not collapse. It should look like this. Perfect. Now, I will proceed to the mixture of dry ingredients. Here I have them sifted. Now I need to mix the two well with a whisk. So now I'll combine the flour, cocoa powder, and the sea salt. So first I'll add a little bit of this airy mixture into the oil. I'll mix it gently. Like this, it will be much easier for me to incorporate the oil into the sponge batter. Oil is normally quite hard to mix into other components. It just drops to the bottom, and then it is very difficult to mix it in. So for this reason, I mix it with a small portion of this aerated mixture, and then it is very easy to mix it into the other components. So I'll take a little bit, I'll add it here, a bit more, and I mix it with a spatula. So as you see, this mixture thickens really well after adding the aerated mixture. So now it will be really easy to mix it into the rest of the components. Then next step is the addition of dry ingredients. I'll be adding them gradually and we'll be folding them with the spatula. Okay, so the sponge batter is almost ready. Now it looks like this. It already has a beautiful chocolate color. The last final step is to add the oil and the meringue and egg yolk mixture. I add it all at once. As you can see, the texture of it is rather thick. And I'll mix it in seconds. It will be really fast. So now the chocolate sponge batter is ready to be baked. The final texture of it is like this. It is smooth, shiny, with lots of air bubbles inside. Perfect. It should not be too liquid. It should neither be too thick. So this is the texture we are looking for. Now I'll deposit it into 2 baking frames, 22 by 22 centimeters, 4.5 centimeters in height, and then we'll bake them in the oven at 160 degrees Celsius for about 10 to 15 minutes. I'll show you the way how to determine whether the sponges are ready or not, so that you can compare the way they look to those that you make at home and take them out just in time. As you can see, I'm baking them on the silicone mat, but you can also bake them on parchment. There's no difference. Now I'll scale 450 grams of the sponge batter per frame and we'll put them in the oven. After 15 minutes in the oven at 160 degrees Celsius, the sponge is ready. It looks beautiful, it has risen, it has an even surface. To check whether the sponge is properly baked, I use 2 methods. Method 1 is to press in the center and on the sides, and if the sponge springs back, it means it is done. Method 2 is to insert a skewer or a toothpick in the center. And if it comes out clean, it will also mean that the sponge is ready. Now I'll leave the sponges to cool down completely at room temperature, and then we'll put them in the freezer. If I want to store them for later use, they can keep in the freezer for up to 1 month, or alternatively, I can proceed to assembling the cake straight away. The cooling time is approximately 2 hours. They should be room temperature. So after about 2 hours at room temperature, the sponges have cooled down completely. Now I can remove the frame. To do this, I'll first unstick the silicone mat, like this. Then I will insert the knife from the back side, like this, and we'll remove the frame. See? The sponge is beautiful, it's flexible, it's really airy, and now I'll transfer it here. And then I'll trim the top crust out of it. After unmolding, I need to remove the crust out of each sponge so that they're leveled and so that the cross-section of my future individual cake is beautiful. To do this, I'll be using a serrated knife and I'll simply remove the top crust. So after removing the crust, the sponges are ready to be used for assembling the individual chocolate cake. Next step is the preparation of the vanilla cream. To make it, I'll need just 4 ingredients. Whipping cream, cold, straight from the fridge, a bit of ice and sugar, sifted, to sweeten up the preparation, and a bit of mascarpone cheese, to make the texture thicker and to add the characteristic mascarpone flavor. The 4th ingredient is the flavoring. It's the vanilla part. You can use anything that you wish. You can skip the flavoring at all, and it will be the plain cream, which can be used as a filling, as a decoration, whatever you wish. So first of all, I'll place the ice and sugar, the mascarpone cheese and vanilla pod seeds in the mixing bowl. I'll start by placing ice and sugar. Then I add the cold mascarpone cheese. And now I'll split the vanilla pod in half, we'll remove the seeds and we'll place them over here. Now I'll start whisking the mascarpone with ice and sugar and vanilla until softened. The idea is to soften the mascarpone cheese and make it easier to mix with the whipping cream. Instead of mascarpone, you can use any type of cream cheese, like Philadelphia, for example, which is a bit salty, and will give its own characteristic flavor to the frosting, which might also be pleasant depending on the desired flavor profile. After about a minute of mixing, the mascarpone cheese gets softened. It should look like this. So this is the texture. It should be very soft and delicate, like this. Now I'll add the whipping cream and we'll continue whipping on medium speed until the cream reaches good volume and thickens slightly. I'll show you the final texture I'm looking for. After about a minute of whipping, the vanilla cream is ready. It whips quite fast, so make sure you keep an eye on it during preparation because it is very easy to over whip. So the final texture should be like this. It should be soft. It should not be too thick. Otherwise the texture will be unpleasant. It will have a greasy mouthfeel. So the texture should resemble soft serve ice cream, like now. Perfect. The good thing about this cream is that it does not require any stabilization. It can be used straight away. So now I can proceed to assembling the cake. So now I have everything ready to start assembling the individual chocolate cake. The sponges are baked and prepared, the crust is removed, the vanilla cream is over here. Perfect. So to assemble the cake, I'll be using the same frame I used to bake the sponges in. It is 22 by 22 centimeters, 4.5 centimeters high. I don't need to prepare it in any special way. It's simply a frame without any acetate, without anything. So now I'll place the frame on top of the sponge like this. We'll apply the vanilla cream on top, and after that we'll cover everything with the second chocolate sponge. And that's it. The assembling is done. So now the cake is assembled. I need to put it in the fridge for about 2 hours until it stabilizes. And then I'll be able to remove the cake frame, glaze it, and then slice it into portions. At this point, you can also freeze the cake, and then when needed, take it out, defrost, and serve. Now I'll show you how to make the ganache, which will be used as a glaze for my individual chocolate cake. First of all, I need the chocolate. I'm using 70% dark chocolate in this recipe for the powerful chocolate flavor. You can use any type of chocolate. You can use milk, white, dark of different percentage, but make sure to adjust the quantity of the chocolate accordingly. If you're using dark chocolate, you can use same quantity, but play with the percentages of the cocoa content. If you're using milk and white chocolate, then you'll need more of them to achieve the same texture. The chocolate is already melted and it is in the jug for the ease of blending. Then I have the whipping cream. It is cold, taken straight from the fridge. Then butter. It is taken from the fridge, so its temperature is about 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. And the last component, the dark rum for the flavor. You can skip the alcohol if you don't consume it. It is not mandatory in this recipe. In this case, you will need to replace the alcohol with some liquid. You can simply add milk, water, some juice, and use same quantity of that component. So the preparation process is simple. I need to warm up the whipping cream to about 60 degrees Celsius, pour it over the chocolate, blend everything with a blender, and then add the butter and the rum, and that's it. So here is the whipping cream. Now I start warming the cream on medium heat. Okay, so the cream is ready. Its temperature is 60 degrees now. I take it off the heat and I pour it directly over the chocolate. The chocolate is melted at 40-45 degrees Celsius, so it is perfect. So now to combine the whipping cream and the chocolate, I need to use the hand blender to make sure that the liquids in the whipping cream and the fats in the chocolate combine really well. I need an emulsion between those two components so that the ganache is creamy, tender, easy to work with, and does not dry out too fast. Plus, emulsion will mean that the ganache is shiny and beautiful. So I take the hand blender. After combining the whipping cream and the chocolate, the mixture turns out rather thick, like this, but it is already beautiful and shiny. Now I'll add the butter and the rum and we'll blend everything again, and you will notice that the texture will change. After about a minute of blending, the ganache is ready. As you see, it has become much more liquid and much shinier than before. Now it is ready. This ganache is used for glazing, which means it has to be used straight away while it is still warm. After spending 2 hours in the fridge, the chocolate cake is ready to be unmolded. To do this, I'll be using a regular knife, and that's it. I'll simply cut everywhere on the sides, and then we'll lift the cake frame off. After unmolding, I'll place the cake on the glazing rack and we'll pour the chocolate ganache on top. So now I'm ready to glaze the individual chocolate cake. The ganache is 50 degrees Celsius now. It is ready to use. It is rather liquid. Perfect. The cake is cold, taken straight from the fridge. Here I have the large offset spatula to remove the excess of the glaze. And here we go. So I'll be pouring the ganache everywhere on the cake, and then I'll remove the excess with the spatula like this. So the layer is rather thin. I don't need the chocolate to be too thick on the top. So after glazing, you should end up with a thin layer of chocolate ganache, which is shiny and beautiful. And now I leave it like this for about 30 minutes to let the ganache crystallize and set beautifully shiny. And right after glazing, I have some leftover ganache, which I will use to pipe decoration on top. Here I have the ganache. It is same temperature, maybe a bit colder, like 10 degrees colder. I have it in a paper cone, and I'll draw lines, circles, in a chaotic way on the surface of the cake. So I'll try somewhere on the side. So it will be something like this, but on the surface of the cake. So after drawing the lines, I'll leave the cake to set for about 30 minutes at room temperature, and then we'll transfer it in the fridge. Such gradual cooling will help me ensure beautiful sheen of the ganache afterwards. So first 30 minutes at room temperature, and then back into the fridge for about an hour, and then I'll be able to slice the cake. Okay, so the ganache has stabilized on the surface of the individual chocolate cake. Now it is time to trim the edges and slice it into portions. To do this, I'll be using a large, long knife with a thin blade, which is perfect to cut such cakes. So first I trim the edges, just a little bit, about half a centimeter from each side, maybe even less. After trimming the edges, I'll slice the cake into 10 portions, 10 by 4 centimeters. My individual chocolate cakes are ready. The contrast between the moist chocolate sponge and snow-white frosting in the cut make the product very satisfying to look at. The decoration of thin ganache strips create a gorgeous relief on the surface. The ganache on the surface of the cake is a really simple solution, yet effective and delicious. I'm sure you'll love both the look and the taste of these chocolate cakes. I can't wait to try one. Chocolate and cream. It's the taste of my childhood. The moist sponge and silky cream seem like a simple combination, but it's just divine. One bite is not enough. These individual chocolate cakes made up of just 3 textures are a great example of a simple yet very commercially successful product. If you're just starting out in your pastry business or want to add a new product to your selection, these individual chocolate cakes are perfect.